Welcome everyone to the third practical workshop in the Craft Skills for Garden Conservation scheme. Today we're at Audley End, which is a wonderful English heritage garden in the east of England, where they have a fantastic walled kitchen garden full of apples, pears, figs, plums, peaches, apricots, and even in the greenhouse we've got grapes. And we're going to be pruning them, a late summer prune. And we're also going to be hearing about the French system where they prune a little bit earlier and through the summer.
You can see lots to prune and lots unpruned.
We were shown around the garden by Gemma Sturgis, kitchen garden supervisor at Audley End. As a group of gardeners from throughout Europe, we all had different levels of experience of how to look after the fruit trees in our care. But before we were let loose on pruning the espaliers, cordons and fan-trained trees, it was back to basics. How to maintain the tools of the trade.
Just going to have a little bit of a brief demo on tool cleaning and sharpening. So I assume that most of you have done a bit of that before. So some people that love the Felco ones, when I started with the RHS, we all use Felcos. And they're really good because they can be taken fully apart, so you can take the whole blade out, change the blade. It's easy access for actually cleaning and sharpening the blade. And you can also, if you want to, you can send those off and actually get them serviced and they come back, as good as new again. So they're really good for that from that point of view. When I came here, we use Nowaki tools. So these are Nowaki secateurs, so Japanese ones, and they don't come apart. And what I would say from my own personal perspective is that these ones stay sharper for longer. Whereas before, when I used Felcos for a few years, I would have had to sharpen them relatively often. These ones I've only probably sharpened maybe 3 or 4 times in nearly, I know it's 2.5 years, so they stay really sharp, so that's a really good plus point. But having said that, it's always good to have a bit of a clean up, disinfect and all that sort of stuff before you start doing your pruning, to make sure you've got nice sharp tools. So what we do have, we'll be asking you all to just disinfect as you go along, because obviously the trees, we don't want to pass in any sort of diseases from tree to tree, that sort of thing, but also just to make sure they're nice and clean for you guys as well. So this is just a sanitizing spray. And so we'll do that first of all, just give them a bit of a clean up. So we tend to use, it's always good to have a rag, some blue roll, give those a little bit of a clean up just to sterilise them. So we'll have access to those when we're outside. We've got about 5 or 6 bottles, so if you just make sure, if you're moving between trees particularly, if you could do that. So what we've got also is, we've got a little rubber. So this is like an abrasive rubber, and it's called a cream mate, and that is something from Nowaki as well. So you might not have used that before, but this is for cleaning, and it does feel like a rubber really, an eraser, except it has a little bit of abrasion on there, and that's really good. So what you do is you just wet the end of it a little bit, and it's good for getting off all of these sort of black marks on your secateurs. So you just use it like a rubber, make it a little bit wet on the end, and quite quickly, after rubbing it on the surface, you'll actually get quite a clean, shiny secateur. Generally, what you might traditionally use is a whetstone, and they might generally look like that. This is for sharpening. So this is a slightly older-fashioned one. You have one side that's more abrasive than the other. And you would put the block in some water, and that's important to release, just to take up the water, get rid of the air in there, and you'll see some bubbles come up. So it's always important, if you've got a whetstone, to actually wet it, put it in some water for a few minutes, and you'll see bubbles come up. So I pre-soaked these ones. So these ones I haven't soaked, so what you'll do is you'll put that in there and you'll see the bubbles. And once that's been in there a few minutes, it's ready to go. So this sort of thing you might put in a vise, just so it's there nice and steady. You'll start off with the most abrasive and then go to the least abrasive, so the slightly finer side. I was taught there's a few different ways that people tend to do this. I was taught at the RHS, where I was taught in Essex, to get the blade, and some people run along at an angle. So imagine you've got this in a vise, keep it nice and still. Some people run it along at a slight degree all the way along, but I was actually taught to kind of get the angle in and go all the way around. So you try and keep it, obviously imagine it's still. You've got the blade this side, so you see the slight different edge on there. This is the flat side. You don't want to sharpen the flat side. You want to sharpen the side with the blade on. So you just want to get a nice smooth motion with the same pressure all the way round. And it's not top on, it's not flat, it's a slight angle all the way around from the inside all the way to the edge. And you just keep doing that. Nawaki do 3 different whetstones. This is the middle kind of abrasiveness. There's a finer one and then there's a more abrasive one, but this is the kind of one for general everyday cleaning and sharpening. So again, you wet this one, you let the bubbles come through, and it's got a slightly sort of beveled shaped edge on here. So this one, again, you can get it like this, make sure it's nice and being safe with that. And you get the side edge, so there's a rounded edge on top, and then underneath you just want to get the underneath that's slightly concave in the middle. And again, you can just run that along the inside to get the blade nice and sharp. So it's just another type of stone. It's nice that it's smaller than your traditional ones, so you've got a bit more flexibility to really get in on the blade. And you can even do slightly back and forward motions, but I prefer to just go one way, same motion all the way along, and just same pressure all the way along as well. So obviously you're always looking at it just to make sure it's sharp as well. The other thing we use is a diamond file. This is a Nawaki one, or you've just got your slightly different ones, traditional ones, but they are just for a little bit more abrasive kind of sharpening. So if you've got like a bit of a nick in your blade there, so maybe something's been cut and it's got a bit of a dent in there and you really want to try and get that dent out, or you want to rework the sharp side, this is really good just for kind of getting that sharp edge back if you've lost the sharp edge. So it's not really for your everyday kind of sharpening, but it's more for if you've had a bit of a problem with your blade and you want to do something a bit more abrasive. So again, that has a smoother side and a more abrasive side, so you work from the most abrasive to the smoother side. So you're just kind of, you can run it back and forward, or you can just go from one end to the other, whatever you prefer really. But it's just making sure that you get the right angle and the right pressure all the way along. So you don't want to kind of go in like that. You don't want to go flat either. You want to make sure you've got this side, which is the blade, and it's almost flat. It's got a slight angle, it's almost flat, but you want to go round. And you can always look at it and you can see, and then you can test it on your paper or your sort of stem or something that you've got. It's always good to check. But I would say the more you do it, the more you get used to it, and you get used to your own secateur and the blade, and they're all a little bit different. But the first few times I did it, when I very first got secateurs, very easy to just flatten that out, to lose it. So yeah, always have a bit of a practice really. And then obviously for cleaning and stuff as well as the cream mate, you've got your regular wire wool, which is always good, just a little bit of oil. So we tend to use either WD-40 or all-in-one oil. First of all, it's just you want anything that moves on there, you want a little bit of oil, so it's always good to have oil around both sides here to work it all the way through. So you'd just put a bit of this on, just there. And with anything, shears, anything, you want to make sure it just works all the way through. So always put it down, work it through, put it up, work it through. Just helps everything. If you get anything slightly feeling a little bit tight, it's always good to just give it a little bit of oil and then just rub any excess off. So yeah, they're sort of good to go now. So they've had a bit of a clean. Obviously, if you want to take longer to do it, that's fine. You want to get it all really nice and clean, you can almost get it back to new with this.
So why do we train and prune fruit trees in the first place? By growing trees in 2 dimensions against a wall or wires, gardeners have been able to take full advantage of the microclimates offered by a walled kitchen garden for centuries. Training branches horizontally encourages the formation of fruit buds, and pruning in the summer to restrict vegetative growth is a technique perfected by a French fruit expert, Louis Lorette.
Louis Lorette was a French gardener, and I think it's around 100 years or so ago that he worked and really studied fruit trees and spent many years looking at them. And I think he particularly worked with pears, but pears and apples you treat very similarly. And the idea was he would go around the garden, and I think as he worked, it was almost every 6 weeks he would work on the trees. Every day he'd be out there, and it's as much tying in as anything, but it's pruning them every 6 weeks. If a shoot was too vigorous, he may pinch it out, and it's that Lorette system, Louis Lorette. So we prune at least 3, going into 4 times throughout the year. We do a winter prune in February, which is pruning our leaders and a bit of spur simplification. We then do our first round of pruning, which is mid-June, which is taking back our laterals and beginning that summer pruning. And then we come back to mid to late August, which is this time of year, and we're removing these longer shoots.
Lorette, he was a gentleman who had lots of time on his hands. He clearly didn't like winter pruning. With the system of pruning that we use, which is often termed modified Lorette system, we do it once and start in August. The basics of summer pruning is to remove 95% of this year's growth. And it's astonishing, even in a dry year, how much growth. We've got a meter there, haven't we? We are cutting right back, not into the old wood, which is, that's where it was pruned last year. So we've got a leaf here and about 1/4 of an inch of this year's growth. You can see last year's pruning was there, and this is where next year's fruit will come. The following year's fruit, 2 years' time, we'll get fruit as a result of this pruning. So we're opening up the tree to the sun and the air. We're removing dead fruit, dead branches. Okay, enough talk. Let's do something.
The participants spread out along the apple espaliers, armed with freshly sharpened and disinfected secateurs. Cutting back to the basal cluster is certainly much quicker than counting leaf buds, as the instruction manuals usually describe.
By pruning this time of year in August, you're going to remove a lot of this vegetative growth, which is going to reveal light and air to your fruits, so they're going to ripen better and you're going to get the most of your edible fruits. The idea with trained fruit, it's a balance of productivity. You know, it's all about growing fruit, but it's also the fruit garden displayed, and it's quite a formal style of gardening. And also with the pruning and the tying in, you're not letting the tree become too overgrown. You might be trying to just grow it against the wall, you might be in a reduced spacing. So by pruning it and tying it in, you're not letting it overtake the rest of the garden, and you're really maximising small spaces.
What we're hoping to achieve is creating the formation of fruiting spurs for next year, preventing the tree from branching, as well creating more leaves that will encourage it to lose its shape as well. So by getting all these practicals, we want the aesthetic, we want the scientific part of, again, the fruit formation, and actually the current fruits we have on the trees as well. So it reaps all those benefits.
It's kind of hard to tell right now what we're standing in front of, and that's that part of a formal pruning. So we are in front of a Belgian fence, but as I say, that's why we prune, because after you've finished all your pruning, take away a lot of this vegetative growth, you start to see the windows through here, and you get to see that formality, but also if you're seeing windows through, it means that air is getting through, which is going to help with the fruit. And then what you have with this is, okay, we're going to get rid of this in August, but there's quite long spurs here, so in your winter prune you're going to look at trying to reduce the spur system, because with your crisscross Belgian fence you don't want your spurs too long, because they're going to interfere with those diamond windows that you're trying to get the clarity of the show.
You can see there's a huge difference in before and after. I think people are understanding the principles of our modified direct technique and building confidence. We've made a good kind of chunk actually, so we've probably done about, I would say about 20%, if that. We've still got quite a way to go, but we've started the ball rolling, and that's the main thing. Great group effort, we can really see the before and after.